Growing up, I was always surrounded by the green flatlands of Oklahoma. It was where I was born and raised from, and an environment that I've grown so used to. It isn't until such a young age I would notice about how different I am compared to the other kids in my grade and just around me in general. I would be considered one of the most native looking people. And as much as that would identify me as to understanding how different I am, it also brought question into my culture. As a Navajo young woman now, it's an honor to see how much I at least knew about this land and I still come to learn and grow from. The women on my father's side, I see them as home and cultured, and they were, of course, raised around this because of course, they were from the reservation. As for me, it's just seen as like an outsider, but compared to my mother's side, I've always felt a sense of welcoming and respect. It isn't until I would realize more later about how respected my grandmother was whenever she passed away. In Tortellini, I just would always come to realize about how it just shaped my memories and just shaped me as a person in general too. That over this memoir, it shaped my understanding of how much my family does mean to me and how my father's side of that land matters to me. And I see it as a part of identity as a Navajo woman on my father's side as to represent. In a moment of vulnerability, my grandma Annie, her land in Tortellini would mean the world to me. And most of it would be because of her, but the land also just seems so strong, and in almost any moment throughout the whole day and even night, the land would be just so breathtaking. I have so many memories of this land, and that is probably why I've grown so strong to it. And to when I would recently visit in February of 2025 of her passing, that going back to that land, I would just notice about how much I love it and how much I miss it so much. And in some way, I feel like it misses me too. Not just because the people around me that they would look at me and think, oh, that's Annie's grandchild. But in a way, have such a mutual respect and such a community of my father's side that it's just been family, of how we help each other and how the land helps us as well. But my grandma Annie would mean the world to me. And every day I seem to just always miss her, even when she was alive. In a vulnerable moment, I would like to share just a little bit of how she sounded. And how one day, and many days, and who knows who I'm to tell, that her story would continue. And that this would be in honor of her and for her, of this land memoir, of how I always think of her. And when I think of her, I think of that land. And that's the strong comparison that I can do for my land memoir, is how I see this land so strong. Historical events and cultural sort of events that I could find are from both research and personal wise. I would find out about historical events connected to this land that I would look through websites of historical information of the area of Tortellini and the Navajo Reservation. It would be connected about how Spaniards would patrol the area and that they would try to find Navajos to make them slaves, maids, servants, torture them, and even kill them. Along with also finding out about how I was always curious growing up about the trading posts that would be in Tortellini that would be very shined upon, but also just kind of be there in general. And along with that, there would be the installment in Tortellini about the trading post that Bill Laganas would make on the reservation. From research of the website that I would find, the Tortellini trading post would be an opportunity for Navajo women and men in general to sell pelts, sell hand woven rugs or blankets, in other words, not rugs. Because what I've also come to realize is about how rugs would be a more Bilagana term that would be installed into this whole ideology behind rugs and blankets, but really it's always just been blankets and have a more. They would do this in order to earn some money from time and needs, but also because of the area that Tortellini is in, that is in the middle of basically a desert, that a grocery store or a gas station would be miles away. And to even get there, it would be just different transportation, along with just different ways and how to get there or to even get. All sorts of emotions would come up to me whenever I would visit. Whenever I visit in person, I would be so happy yet comforted, and in a way I can finally let go all my worries and just kind of relax and think about other things that's just outside of the world, that I'm away from the public eye, that I'm away from technology and industry and all this sort of modern timeline. That to be in Tortellini, where my grandmother Annie's house is, it just feels like time has paused and is still in the process into modern time that we are in today. How has the place changed over time? I would say that over time, I just never really saw it to change. Growing up, it just looks the same to me. But of course, in modern retro perspective, how the land was untouched before time, I would say kind of a lot of change of how dirt roads would be installed, along with a very large clear path within over the mountain where there would be electric postings there, very large ones, and that would go right across through Tortellini and even over the mountain as it would be installed into that, along with some neighboring small homes and just homes all around, even a just dusty church that's just sitting on the side of the road, and fences that broke off or have not broke off or anything, where cattle and horses can go ahead and mosey along. But overall, right now I feel like the roads and everything just seems to be untouched for over the years. For how I see it to be unchanged before us, I would say it has changed quite a bit, especially. But from my lifetime, I feel like in some way it has barely even changed. This place ties my sense of belonging into fruition for how much I adore and miss this place that I call home personally. My dad's side means a lot to me, and in some way that is how I identify. And of course, to no hard feelings on my mother's side, there's just many reasons personally to why is that. But with my dad's side, I feel more open about it because there's such a comfort and sense of belonging in my family. And the land, I think that's also another reason why, for how the land just seems to be so untouched, yet it's also cared for, along with how close yet distant me and our family members are. But in some way, it's always a cousin is just right down the road, and seeing horse and sheep, and just many other things. In all honesty, the land, it's just beautiful yet so untouched, like I said before. And I guess another thing that really adds on to it is just family. How even the family members that I knew or I have not knew, they would be buried in our own family burial area. And I guess that in some way that is why I care for that land so much, because that is where my family is at, where my relatives have passed and rested, and they rest in that land area. It's also because of how much they built and how much they continue to be there. No sense of neighborhood community such as like how my other grandma lives in, but in a way of how I see the reservation to be, of how a cousin is down the road, and just to see how much one house can be so distant, and everywhere you look it's just trying to take a picture in your own head for. Learning and understanding more of the land was quite interesting. I've known this land my whole life, and I still find ways that I'm still learning more about it, along with how I see comfort in the land and how much I just trust it. Thinking in an indigenous futurism influence or perspective in some way, I can see how the land can change and sometimes maybe drastically change, because in this world, in this country, who knows what is to happen to our reservation, especially the area my family is in is only a little bit in the New Mexico area of the Navajo reservation. So knowing that, who knows if just one day that whole area will not be reservation anymore, and then most of it would be in Arizona or in just so many different possibilities. But that's just a bad way of how I see indigenous futurism, is to how in some way we finally get taken over, and that in some way hope is lost. But in a different point of view, in a hopeful point of view, I see the land improving, even though there is so much change and better needs that need to be incorporated, such as uranium getting into our water system that was accessible to everyone. But now there are people who have to go into the mountain to even get fresh spring water that's safe than how the uranium mine is. But for indigenous futurism, I see my land being a part of it, yet not. Who knows what is to come to it? In some way, I don't want to see it as that, but it's best to think of the possibilities. What I do know is that knowing that my father's side is from that land, that land would be strong, and where they're buried, they would keep it strong.